Joe Piscopo is next on AM970. The Answer.
Dr. Herb London is president of the London Center for Policy Research. He is a mentor to those of us who even think about public office, who are concerned with all the policies that the government brings forth to us that we disagree with. And on a morning like this, Dr. London, thanks for coming in, Herb. Great to see you, my friend.
Well, pleasure to be with you, of course.
You're a great American and one of the smartest guys in the world. And I always thank Frankie Five Boroughs for introducing us, and we're due for a lunch. We got to get together for
I look forward to
our
it.
lunches. And what do you say after this whole Vegas scenario? I mean, what is your brilliant mind, Herb London, tell you? How does it happen? How do we deal with it? And where do we go from here, sir?
Well, the only thing that one can say is that events of this kind are really ineffable. There's nothing that you can say that makes any sense. The fact is that there are twisted minds in our society, and there's very little that you can do about it. We live in a vulnerable and open society, and as a consequence, there may very well be these odd characters living in cages who have notions about killing others, maybe appearing on Facebook or getting the kind of attention that they believe they deserve. But unfortunately, there's very little that you can do about it. You can have all of the algorithms in the world. You can try to track down all of these people. But in the end, there is no way in which you can possibly monitor 320 million people in the United States and recognize the fact that some of them might very well be very twisted.
There's something, I don't want to be a conspiracist here, but I lean that way. Something's fishy about this. Are you feeling that? All those guns, no red flags. This guy gets into a casino, and you're as stable an individual as I know, Dr. London. You really have a great overview of things, and you do your research and everything, which I love. Why is my street sense? Why is that street sense that we have in Jersey and New York telling me something's askew here?
When someone has collected 54 weapons, when they have managed to change the character of the semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon, there's something going on here. There's no doubt about it. He's also a fellow who has great resources. In order to have the cars that he has and the guns that he has, he had to have resources. The claim that's being made is that he's a gambler, made $250,000 on one occasion. But even so, this is something that's very odd about this. So I understand the kind of conspiratorial notions that you're dealing with. I share some of them. But at the same time, it's very likely that there are simply twisted minds among us. And there's very little that you can do about that. I mean, when you think about it, the authorities can say, oh, gun control. Of course, you'll hear that message being delivered. But it's also true if there was one person in the Mandalay Hotel who had a gun at his disposal and shot this fellow as soon as he started this rampage, there is no doubt maybe one or two people would have lost their lives, but not 59, not 500 people being injured. Certainly you could make the argument on the other side of the equation that if someone had guns, if they were packing, that this might have been a very different set of circumstances.
Yeah, I agree in that regard. And then you see Hillary Clinton. I'm not a Hillary hater. I don't mean to, there's no animus or hate there toward Mrs. Clinton. But do you really talk about gun control while they're pulling the bodies out of that area in Vegas?
I think it's distinctly inappropriate. I think that it's shameful. I think by and large what we have in the United States today are people who are clearly playing the public card even when it's inappropriate to do so. My feeling is this is a time for grieving. This is a time for the United States to think about ways in which we come together. The rancor in America is not helpful. It's not helpful for the future of this country. It's not helpful for young people. We've got to realize that there are people who have different points of view. That doesn't make us disagreeable. We have to try and do everything in our power to see about ways in which the United States can be unified. The government is not going to deal with this problem. It's going to be a grassroots effort on the part of those who care about the future of America, worrying about our educational systems, our associations, the kind of groups that come together and think very seriously about ways in which we as a community can work together.
President Trump yesterday, I thought his tenor was right on the money dealing with this horrible situation. Yes?
Oh, I think so. I think the president undoubtedly got it. He said all of the right things. He did talk about unity. And I think this is precisely what has to be discussed in America today. It was very interesting that his predecessor, President Obama, continually talked about rancor in America. And yet, to some degree, he encouraged that rancor. I think what we want to see is an America that is very different from what we experienced over the last 8 years. And we start thinking about ways in which Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Marxists can come together to at least engage in civil discourse It's very difficult, even in a university setting today, to consider ways in which people can actually give an open exchange of opinion, where there's a kind of reasonable tenor in the room, instead of shouting and screaming and forcing people to leave. I think it's time for Americans to come to the realization that we as a people will survive only when we come to the understanding that the kind of civil exchanges are necessary.
And I used an analogy of the gentleman, Michael Faulkner, running for controller. Yeah, he's a good kid. I say kid.
Former jet.
Yeah, right. And he says, I said, as an African American, I said to Michael, was it tough for you? He goes, my mom always said we had to try harder. And that's the same thing I got from my Italian-American parents. Yeah. You're an Italian, you're going to be a greaseball. You're going to be, everybody's going to look down on you. Joe DiMaggio never ate garlic because he was afraid of being, a stereotype. So you try harder. Everybody's gunning for, not literally, but they're going after President Trump. He can't do anything right. So he has to try harder. Do you think him going to the President's Cup, Jersey City, was maybe not the appropriate thing to do? Maybe he should have done under the radar in the still of the night trip to Puerto Rico a little earlier? Am I being too critical there?
One of the things that you have one tragedy after another. The events in Puerto Rico are indeed very tragic. What you have are people walking around with water up to their waist. And there's no doubt that 3 million people are without power and food. It is a terrible tragedy. Again, but we've had one tragedy after another. When you think about the resources that we have in the United States, we do not have unlimited resources. We had the tragedy in Houston, the tragedy in Florida, and now Puerto Rico. It is undoubtedly a human tragedy that has to be addressed, and I think the president is sensitive to it. I think some of the criticism has been distinctly unfair.
Mm-hmm. And he's going there to Puerto Rico today.
Yeah, I know.
And with the San Juan mayor, though, that seemed disingenuous on her part. Forgive me. I mean, she's got platforms of water and supplies behind her, and she's got a shirt. Where did she get that shirt that would say "We are dying"? How does she have the time? What shirt shop was open in Puerto Rico to print that shirt? I mean, really.
Look, I think what you have here are people, the fellow who is responsible for the production of Hamilton comes out and attacks the president. All of it is premature. I mean, look, no one wants to see the suffering that is occurring in Puerto Rico. No sensible person believes that. Yeah. And certainly the president understands that as well. And the only thing is, we have limited resources, and you do everything that you can under these circumstances, which are very difficult.
Dr. Herb London with Joe Piscopo, 846. Love when Dr. London is kind enough to visit president of the London Center for Policy Research. Cuba. Man, what happened in Cuba? That was so weird with our diplomats. What was going on? You have any inside line on that, Herb?
Well, it's not the first time that this sort of thing has happened, by the way. The Cubans have used all kinds of techniques in order to try and create an environment that's very uncomfortable for American diplomats. And keep in mind that what is happening now is that the Cuban-American relationship has started to sour in large part because so many of the concessions that were made by President Obama are now looked at very carefully by Trump, thinking about maybe it doesn't make sense to provide the kind of support we have. Keep in mind that the Cuban secret police have been playing a significant role in Venezuela, supporting Maduro in Venezuela.
Wow.
And so all through South America, the Cubans are playing a rather nefarious role. So the United States, I think, has every right to start looking at the relationship again and looking at this matter dispassionately as opposed to the role that President Obama played.
I mean, how does President Obama open up diplomatic relations before they bring back Joanne Chesimard, the cop killer?
I just don't understand it. I mean, frankly, we got nothing out of the deal. We gave and we didn't get. I look at any kind of negotiation, there's supposed to be a give and take. In this particular negotiation, there was not. We gave the Cubans, we opened up Cuba, we made it possible for them to have tourism, we made it possible for them to have trade, and we got nothing in return.
North Korea, Herb, this is scary. How do you deal with this guy? And I always say, street sense, take him out. Couple Italian guys from Jersey, send them over there. How do you deal with Kim Jong-un?
Well, first of all, look, the military option is the last and the worst option available to you. And when you talk about the military option, keep in mind, you don't want to kill 25 million North Koreans. You don't want to put 28,000 Americans who are tripwire in South Korea in jeopardy. You don't want to see South Koreans die or Japanese die. So obviously, it's very easy to be cavalier about this. My feeling about it is the other day that there's something that occurred in the United Nations that received very little attention on the part of the press. In fact, no attention on the part of the press, which was very interesting. The Chinese had a proposal. In some respects, it was a ridiculous proposal. It was called freeze. And what the Chinese were saying at the time is the North Koreans should freeze all testing, and the United States should freeze all military activity. Now, the reason why I say it's absurd is because it creates this notion of a kind of moral equivalence between the United States and North Korea, which is ridiculous. And of course, Nikki Haley very wisely said this is absurd. But what struck me as so interesting about the proposal, leave aside one side of the equation, which is what the Americans do. Just think about what the North Koreans have to do. The Chinese are saying, we can control North Korean testing. Now, if that's true, it's the first time that admission is being made. If that's true, that's the beginning of a negotiation. You can control the North Korean testing? All right, provide verification. Let us know whether, in fact, you can really do that. And if that's true, that is the beginning of a negotiation and maybe a way to solve this problem. And the reason why Tillerson is there and they're playing good cop, bad cop with the president is precisely because I think this kind of discussion is taking place.
You're the best. Good. That's exactly what that is. I mean, they look what the president said about Rex Tillerson, and you and I go, yeah, right. Like Rex Tillerson, scary dude. Right. Rex Tillerson. I like oil. I like peace. I like that boy. He looks like a tough guy. Is he? I hope he's not on the way out. Is that what you're hearing?
I don't know. I mean, I think that I've heard those rumors, of course, and there are always those rumors about what occurs in the White House. But at the same time, I think it's important to note that these negotiations, these sensitive negotiations, have put him right in the center of State Department activities. He's playing an important role in this administration.
Yeah, Dr. London, you play such an important role on our show here. We appreciate it so much. This is a brilliant man, president of the London Center for Policy Research. And look at the guys, the dapper dress, the pocket square. You're taking us. You're smoking us all, Herb. Look at it. Can we see that on camera? If you turn that way to the camera. Look at this. It's so meticulous.
People can go to our Facebook page and see this.
Well,
AM970 The Answer.
Where did you get that? Man, that's the square.
I'll buy one for you.
Thank you.
I'll be happy to get one for you.
I'll take it.
Get one for
no
Joe
question.
Coco as well.
Right.
Yeah. Herb, good to see you always, sir.
Always a pleasure.
No.
And you got my brother coming on in just a little while.
That's it.
Tony LoBianco is coming on.
Tony's coming in, and Tony LoBianco, one of the great actors.
And his charming wife, Elise. So please send her my best regards.
Family time. Thank you, Dr. London.
Yeah, very nice to see you.
Always a privilege, always a pleasure.
If it's happening in New York, New Jersey, or Long Island, hear about it with Joe Piscopo. Mornings, 6 to 10 on AM 970. The Answer.